Joe Miller back with you, The Joe Miller Show. We have Chris Walker on the line with me now. We're going to talk about Second Vote. It's an organization that Chris is the executive director for, designed to put pressure on corporate America from the conservative pocketbook to help bring accountability to those corporate interests that think they can act independent of American values and not have any type of economic consequence. And, Chris, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. Restoring Liberty put out an article about Starbucks and traditional marriage a couple of years ago, and I think we got, 1.5 million hits on it, something like that. There are several 100,000 Facebook likes on it. It really hit a chord because people were desperate for information about where they're spending their money and how they might be advancing causes that are contrary to their interests. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe. Good to be on. And you're right. We have a second vote, and some people look at us and say, second vote, what is that, acorns? And we go, no. You're voting every day with your pocketbook. You just don't know what you're voting for. And a lot of instances, like Starbucks being a perfect example, is we're funding a lot of left-wing causes, whether it's Planned Parenthood, whether it's Human Rights Campaign, whether it's the ACLU, who are attacking Christian values and attacking traditional values every day through their activities. And the cup of coffee that we buy or the hamburger that we buy, a lot of times a portion of that goes to a company or an organization that funds the very issues and causes that we would be fighting against at the ballot box. So we've created an app and a website to help educate consumers, educate conservative consumers on how your vote really matters, not just on Election Day, but every day.
So give us a little background. Why did you get involved with Second Vote?
Well, we looked at it from a standpoint of how are we able to make a difference? You know, when you talk to a conservative activist, a lot of times they say, well, we don't have the ability to, make a difference. Our vote doesn't count. Or, we felt like we spent all of our time and energy trying to defeat Barack Obama 2 years ago, and it went to nothing. And so, we started thinking, well, we do have a vote every day with our money, and we're not really holding those dollars accountable. So when we look at the width and breadth of an organization or a company, we said, well, how do we condense this data into an easy to understand format? So that's where we came up with the idea with an app and the website secondvote.com and really trying to make it easy for a conservative shopper to have alternatives. A lot of people will say, well, I can't, I don't know if a company's conservative or not, or, well, I know Starbucks is bad, but where else can I go? What we've done is created an ability for you to not only find liberal companies, but find more conservative companies so you can shop there and know that your dollars aren't going to fund, radical left-wing agenda items like Planned Parenthood that funds abortions or Human Rights Campaign that funds the anti-traditional marriage campaign and all, There are so many groups out there, and we're trying to connect the dots so you can make purchasing decisions with an ease of mind.
So, Chris, how many corporations are you evaluating on your app?
Well, we're adding every day. We have about 450 companies now, and that ranges from anything that you can imagine, from Apple to American Airlines to Netflix, all the way to Food Lion and FedEx and Walgreens and Verizon. So, we try to really make a strong case for any type of activity that you're going to make in the economy that we have a connection to what you're spending. And we also really work hard to try to make sure that folks who want to get an idea of a company that they frequent on the local level, that we can score that too. Because at the end of the day, we think that a lot of this can be generated to local companies and small businesses where you know the owner and you know the work and you can feel confident where you shop there. So, again, over 450 companies now, over 1,000 scores overall on about 6 different issues: life, marriage, environment, education, like school choice and Common Core, radical environmentalism. In Alaska, obviously, with all the enviros talking about drilling, we've seen it with ANWR and other things. It's a constant struggle, even fighting some of these environmental groups. So, time and again, we try to make sure that if there's an issue that we care about as conservatives and there's a company that you could shop at, we want it in our database so you can access it and check for yourself.
So with respect to the criteria, do you have any type of entry for crony capitalism?
We do
Good.
actually.
Fantastic.
We have a group called Corporate Welfare. So we've looked at companies like Bank of America and Citigroup and J.P. Morgan and the list goes on and on that. That's probably, I would have to confess, it's probably our smallest issue so far because we just started it. But that is something that we've looked at as well, because again, if somebody's trying to buy influence or access, which most companies do, and there is a right to lobbying to a certain degree, but when companies can pick their own regulations at the expense of the little guy, we definitely want to try to call that out as well.
So if you have any questions for Chris, 569-1080, 569-1080. If you're with us by live stream, area code 907. I'm sure Chris would love to answer your questions. Chris, with respect to the companies that you've evaluated, do you have any top horror stories about the worst performing companies that may not really be known in kind of the contemporary realm?
Well, there are a lot of bad actors, and part of the reason why we think that's the case is that there hasn't been a tool like Second Vote at a conservative arsenal. So, for instance, we've just seen over the past year left-wing groups pressuring companies to stop funding conservative groups like ALEC, which helps conservative state legislators come up with policy. Or we saw with the Mozilla CEO last year where, the CEO had donated just a small portion to a traditional marriage amendment campaign in California, and he lost his job because of it. So, we see egregious examples of that through the prism of regular activity by the left, because we're kind of behind the eight ball here for about a good 30 years. The left has pressured companies for a long time and have gotten really good results out of it. But if you're looking at specific examples, I would point to NBC Universal, for instance. We've seen not only with Brian Williams in the news, but they fund a ton of left-wing organizations. NBC Universal is a corporate sponsor for the liberal group Center for American Progress, which supports carbon taxes and abortion and cap and trade and strong labor unions. I mean, they've been labeled as Hillary Clinton's think tank, and NBC Universal feels it necessary to donate to them. On the Second Amendment, they fund groups like Coalition to Stop Gun Violence and Mayor Bloomberg's group. And on marriage, they are advocate and strong advocate for same-sex marriage. And we see that on all of their television. And so, time and again, we've seen not only in the liberal leanings of the news, but if you kind of dig and see what these companies are doing, we see it again in terms of their activity on an action level. I would tell you another example. I do a weekly column in Red State, and we talked about the health snack Kind. I don't know if your listeners have heard of that a lot, but if you shop at Walmart or Starbucks, you'll see these health bars called Kind. And the CEO of Kind Bars contributed thousands of dollars to Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, the DNC. They've funded activities that are against Keystone Pipeline. They've funded pro-abortion things, events, higher taxes. That's a group that I think we've found and dug into and tried to find a little bit more information on, and we're just shocked at what we found. Not only were they against a lot of things domestically, but the CEO founded an organization that's actively opposing Benjamin Netanyahu's upcoming election in Israel.
Wow.
So not only are they attacking our traditional values, they're attacking international traditional values in Israel.
What's the underlying motivation?
I would say it's twofold. One, I would say the CEO activity. You mentioned Starbucks earlier, and Howard Schultz is a perfect example of a left-wing activist CEO, where he's been in actual stockholder meetings and saying, if you don't support gay marriage, you should not be a shareholder in our company. So in an instance like Starbucks, that's a perfect example of a CEO that leads by ideas. I would also say, too, though, that there's just a lot of outside pressure. Liberals are very good at forcing their opinions on other people. We see that in the news every day. If a poor baker in Colorado doesn't want to bake a cake for a gay wedding, they're being forced into doing it by the state, and that's a lot based on liberal activity. And conservatives are not the protesters. We really want to kind of have the positive influence, and we're the family. We own businesses and raise families and, attend our local churches for the most part. And we don't want to see ourselves become politicized in every instance of our life. And so in an instance like this, we kind of have allowed ourselves to be spectators rather than activists in this. And so I think we kind of get what we expect when we don't engage in this type of arena. And that's why I think something like second vote is so important to do, is because we have to start playing in that field as well.
Right. And one of the complaints I've heard, I'll talk about Starbucks, or I'll talk about one of these other companies that is pushing the gay agenda with folk, and they'll tell me, look, Joe, it really doesn't matter. Everybody's involved in this stuff. All the multinational corporations are up to their eyeballs in bad activities. I can't really, if I were to sit back and say, I'm not going to spend my money on this company because of its agenda, then I'd be sitting back, basically just shopping at the mom and pop store and hoping that, I can get by with those purchases. Apparently you found that there are good actors as well, right?
There are good actors. And, we look at neutrality as good actors. If you're selling widgets and that's all you're doing, great. Go forth and prosper. It's when you get involved in all these cultural issues and when you get involved in all of these political issues outside of the scope of what your company is doing, becoming a social activist tool, we find that they're...
And Chris, we're coming up on the bottom of the half hour. Can you stay with us for another 15?
Absolutely.
Great. Back with you in a few. Back with the Joe Miller Show. If you're looking for Laura Ingraham, she's on 9 to 11 a.m. now daily, and also the hour before Dan Fagan's show, 5 to 6 a.m. I'm on the air with Chris Walker, the executive director of Second Vote. And Chris, we were talking about your app the last 15 minutes. One of the things that really confuses me in evaluating these corporations, some multinational corporations, some just large national corporations, taking action that seemed to be so contrary to what the average American expects. Traditional marriage is a good example. I mean, years ago, you'd see some of these corporate interests acting in a way that was contrary to at least every poll I saw with respect to gay marriage, pushing forward kind of this elite agenda of tearing down the institution of marriage. And they did this despite the fact that, at least theoretically, they're in the business to make money. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me that, number one, you'd push an agenda that's contrary to the average American's values, or that, two, you'd even register on these issues that that don't have anything to do with the product that they're marketing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a fantastic question, Joe, and I think it's a multifaceted answer. But I think that the biggest part of this that lies to motivation is political pressure from left-wing advocates. They wouldn't be doing this if they didn't feel like they had to. I mean, if you were to really talk to these companies and really kind of get them behind closed doors and off the record and say, why are you doing this? They would tell you it's a cost center to them. They would tell you that it eats into the bottom line and doesn't really provide any value for them aside from appeasing very, very vocal activists who are pressuring them to fund their pet causes. I like to call it almost the Sharpton effect of pay up or we're going to boycott you. And in this instance, it's been effective. The Human Rights Campaign goes to these companies and says, fill out our form or we're going to say that you're bad on the gay marriage issue. And by the way, we represent, $1 billion of purchasing power or whatever they claim to represent. And I've done corporate consulting. I've seen it on the inside. These guys cower immediately when somebody threatens them or talks to them because they want to keep you as a customer. So instead of saying, no, we don't get involved, or no, we have customers on the other side, they immediately kowtow and they immediately capitulate to what's been demanded of them, and they go about doing it.
So, I mean, these companies that are bowing to the left, when these activists come in and say, look, we've got $1 billion of purchasing power behind us. If you don't side with, for example, gay agenda or a radical environmental agenda, we're going to pull that. Do they have a similar app? I mean, are there similar groups on the left that are rating conservative companies and saying, don't spend your money there?
Well, I think we saw it with the example of Chick-fil-A from a couple of years ago. You had some activists come out and try to attack Dan Cathy for saying he believed in traditional marriage, and they were trying to inflict harm on them. And in response, conservatives stood up and said, no, we appreciate that, and they had their single largest shopping day in their history. So we know we have influence and power if we choose to wield it. Unfortunately, it's a one-sided argument. It's a one-sided fight. if we don't stand up and if we don't let these companies know how we feel about these issues, how we feel about these activities, we can't be surprised that these results are so left-wing. Out of the 450 companies that we scored, 70% of them are liberal or lean liberal. And that's in part because that these activists have been working on these companies for years, if not decades, trying to get them to fund their pet causes. So and we've been willing to stand by and watch it.
Of the companies that you rate, have you actually seen any of them change position based upon Second Vote's assessment?
We've seen this with a good example is SunTrust. SunTrust last year tried to cancel activity with the Benham brothers because of their traditional family values ideas. And we helped lead a cause with several other conservative groups to talk to SunTrust and let them know that we didn't appreciate that and that the Benham brothers were actually in the mainstream of American thought. And SunTrust backed down really quickly. So yes, there are examples of it. I would say we're still new, and we haven't really taken this enough for a spin to see how much we can get out of this. And we will. We continue to engage with these companies and try to get a full view of how and why they operate. We're still new at this. Again, I think we're at a 20-year disadvantage, and we're trying to catch up very quickly on this. But we have seen positive influence when conservatives engage. Again, Chick-fil-A is a perfect example of that. We need 100 of those to be able to show that our dollars really have impact and value.
When you're evaluating companies, I mean, you said that you have several hundred that currently are assessed. Do you have a dollar threshold? In other words, the amount of the capital value of the company or the value of sales per year that you use to determine who you're going to rank?
We go all over the place, and I don't mean that to sound sparse, but we want to see where somebody's making an impact. So, for instance, Ace Hardware, which we scored because we want to try to find an alternative to Home Depot, are a lot of independently owned companies. So, I mean, as a total of total revenue, we don't put a number on that because we really wanted to try to find a better alternative. So, as we continue to grow, as we continue to look at new companies, I don't think we have a particular number threshold. But we look at all the big ones, obviously, that people interact with. Comcast is a perfect example, and you mentioned earlier who are some bad guys. I don't think it's far-fetched to say Comcast is one of the worst. They fund tons of anti-Second Amendment activities, the Center for American Progress, the Urban League, Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. They fund the GLAAD, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. They've signed amicus briefs for the Supreme Court rulings on gay marriage bans. They're active on the anti-life issue, funding groups like Girls Inc. So Comcast, for instance, is a perfect example of a company that we probably rely on way too much for television and media and everything else that takes our money and spends it on a ton of activity.
So if you get the app and you go to Comcast and you click on Comcast, at first you're going to see off to the side a rank for it. It's probably well into negative territory. But if you click on that company, do you then pull up a ranking in each of these criteria, the life criteria, marriage, education, environment?
Yes.
Okay.
Every issue that we score is under each company. So and the beauty of the app and the database online at secondvote.com is also that you can sort by issue. So if you are, if life is your main issue, and it should be for many people, it is actually a really good tool for looking specifically on the life issue. What companies are good or bad on the issue that I care about? If you're a Second Amendment advocate and really want to know is, are they good on guns or not? You can sort directly through that and see which companies are good. You can sort by industry, by individual company, and by issue to really kind of hone in for exactly what you're looking for. And again, the best part is it's free to access. All you have to do is create a free account in our database of 450 companies and nonprofits, by the way. It's at your disposal to be able to dig through and see which companies are good, which nonprofits are good, and which ones are bad, and which nonprofits are bad.
And Second Vote itself is a nonprofit, correct?
We are a nonprofit, yes. We're donor-based. We're based out of Nashville, Tennessee, so we're outside of the Beltway, thankfully. We really want to focus on empowering conservative consumers. At the end of the day, conservatives for a very long time have been willing to sit on the sidelines and then wonder why the world is changing around them. We hope a tool like Second Vote, by just quickly downloading something on your smartphone where you can really start making a difference about how you shop, can make a positive impact on the community that we live in and the nation that we live in, that we love and we see slipping away on the issues that we care about.
So if somebody wants to download the app, they can go to the, I assume, Google Play Store on their Android. They can go to Second Vote on the internet. Do you have any other contact information you can give our listeners?
We are at the Apple Store or on the iTunes Store, Second Vote. You can also find us on the web at secondvote.com. You can spell it out or use the number 2 ndvote.com, and you can download directly from our website as well. We're
Okay.
also on Twitter and Facebook and making sure that all of our stuff is on the social media side of it as well. So we're out there at Second Vote as well.
And Chris, we have about a minute and a half left. What I'd like you to do, if you have your app in front of you, or maybe you're talking on your phone so you don't have it in front, can you just give us a rundown between, let's say, Home Depot and Lowe's? What would happen if we pulled up those two stores? What would we see on the app?
Well, that is a very good example of two very different companies. Lowe's, we kind of deem almost neutral. We actually have them at a 2.5, which is under the lean liberal category, and really they get docked down just a little bit for indirect support of a couple groups on pro-life and environment. So Lowe's, for instance, partners with an organization that supports cap and trade policies, which is called the Nature Conservancy, which is a partnership for U.S. climate change action. So while they didn't directly fund that group, they're a partner with them, so we kind of docked them down a little bit for that, for the indirect connection. And on the life issue for Lowe's, they support the United Way, which supports Planned Parenthood. And we've talked to United Way about it, and they've told us only 5% of their groups are active, but we're trying to really do some research. We found some very interesting statistics so far that seem to indicate that 5% might be a little low.
Great. Well,
but
Chris,
we're still in the research process.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about Second Vote this afternoon. We're going to continue to follow this. I'll plan on posting this interview and perhaps link back to your site so that our listeners can get more information so that they can download the app. Doing great work. Really appreciate that, and I'm certainly going to use it in my purchasing decisions. Thank you,
Great,
Chris.
Joe. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll be back with you in just a couple of minutes.